women hate other women. And it just kind of screams like I made bad decisions and I would like you to make them as well so you can be in my position.
Have you ever wondered what happens when an entire group of people finally takes the advice they've been given for decades, listens carefully, and simply walks away from a system that no longer serves them? In today's world, we're witnessing a profound shift where men are choosing peace, self preservation, and independence over endless obligations and conflicts in relationships and society, and the consequences are reshaping everything we thought we knew about gender dynamics. Stick with me until the very end, because by the time we're done, you'll see not only why this movement is accelerating, but also where it's leading us all in the years ahead. And it might just change how you view your own choices. If you're getting value from this, go ahead and hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell and select all so you never miss any of the great Angry Guy content and get every single video the moment we release it. Also, if you're serious about protecting your assets and building real wealth in these uncertain times, make sure to check out Angry's Crypto Academy, where you'll learn step by step how to buy, sell, and trade crypto safely and effectively. The Academy is linked right in the description of this video, so pause now and go check it out. And if you're enjoying these Angry Guy videos and want to show some support, you can buy me a Red Bull. Using the link in the description, it keeps the energy high and the content coming. Let us dive deep into the story, because it's not just a trend, it's a fundamental realignment that's been building for years. And understanding it requires us to look back at how we got here.
Hi guys. I think there's something we all notice but are not allowed to say. So let me go ahead and say it. Most women harbor a thinly veiled hatred for one another. Behind their all smiles persona, you'll often find a cold war and a silent rivalry among women in everything from the clothes they wear to the guy that they're able to snatch. I think this is why movies like Mean Girls is so enduringly popular, because in both its name and its plot line, it says out loud this politically incorrect truth about female nature with a spin of comedy. So like I often do, I'm taking a dive into the psychological and evolutionary biology to explain why this is. There's one fact from history that still presses on us today. Women are a lot less hierarchical than men are, meaning women tend to see their group dynamics on a more equal level in both status and authority. Men, however, have always been defined by their hierarchies. From hunting thousands of years ago to running modern-day corporations, the need for survival demands that men arrange themselves into a chain of command to get the job done. But where it gets interesting is that even women are more willing to accept the authority of a man over another woman. This is perfectly reflected in a Gallup survey back in 2014, which revealed that more than 39% of women outright say they prefer a male boss at work rather than a female one.
Picture this. For decades, men have been told in no uncertain terms that their traditional roles, their approaches, even their very presence in certain spaces was unwelcome. Messages from media, from social movements, from everyday interactions, all pointed in one direction. Men were encouraged to step back, to give space, to reconsider how they interacted with the world around them. And something remarkable happened. A large number of men listened. They didn't argue endlessly or push against the tide. They simply chose to walk away, to prioritize their own peace and well-being. This isn't about anger or revenge. It's about recognition. Men realized that solitude could bring clarity, that removing themselves from draining dynamics could lead to genuine happiness and stability. Now, let's talk about what happens in nature when a similar imbalance occurs, because there's a fascinating parallel that sheds light on human behavior. In many animal species, when males become scarce in a group, the females don't simply adapt peacefully. Instead, competition intensifies dramatically. Take chickens in a barn, for example. The term henpecking comes from the way hens will turn on each other aggressively when no rooster is present to maintain order. They peck at one another, establishing harsh hierarchies, injuring the weaker ones, all because the balancing presence is gone. This isn't limited to birds. It's observed across numerous species, where females compete fiercely for the limited males available, turning what was once a cohesive group into a battleground of a rivalry and conflict. Why does this matter? Because as men step back from pursuing relationships in the same numbers as before, we're starting to see echoes of this in society, where the scarcity of committed, available men is leading to increased tension among those seeking partnerships. Consider the statistics that paint a clear picture of where things stand today. Right now, a significant portion of young men report being single, choosing not to actively date or pursue romantic entanglements. In contrast, many young women are in relationships, but when you dig deeper, it becomes evident that a smaller group of men is involved with multiple partners simultaneously. This creates an illusion of abundance for some, but overall, it highlights a growing disparity. Projections suggest that by 2030, around 45% of women aged 25 to 44 in the United States will be single and without children. When you include single mothers and those who have been divorced, that figure climbs to between 60 and 70% of women in that demographic being unattached. These aren't just numbers on a page, they represent a massive shift in the social landscape where traditional paths to family and partnership are becoming less traveled, particularly by men who have opted out. As economic pressures mount, with rising costs for essentials like housing and food, the reality of self sufficiency becomes more pressing for everyone. For women who may have relied on shared financial responsibilities in relationships, the absence of willing partners exacerbates challenges. Options for independent income are limited, and many traditional fallback paths come with significant risks or low returns. For instance, content creation platforms often yield modest earnings after fees, and other avenues carry safety concerns or intense competition, especially from younger individuals. In this environment, men who can provide stability become highly valued. But with fewer men interested in that role within Western societies, the dynamics shift towards scarcity. When something becomes scarce, competition naturally increases. And just as in the animal kingdom, this can lead to conflicts, rivalries, and breakdowns in social cohesion among those vying for limited resources. One of the most revealing aspects of the shift is how it exposes the underlying nature of certain relationships. There's a common observation that female friendships, while often presented as strong and supportive, can be fragile when placed under stress. Without men to serve as a stabilizing or mediating force, tensions that were previously managed or overlooked can surface more readily. Women may find themselves competing more directly, blaming one another for the broader shortages, or struggling to maintain alliances in the face of individual survival needs. This isn't to say that all friendships dissolve, but the pretense of unbreakable solidarity often gives way to ruthless self interest when stakes are high. In a world where having a partner can mean the difference between financial security and struggle, the prized status of available men intensifies everything. The world is beginning to wake up to the idea that men walking away will lead to women competing more fiercely over the remaining options, and in some cases, turning inward when no options are left. Men who have chosen this path are those who took the repeated messages to heart, the ones who were told their advances were unwanted, their masculinity problematic, their presence in shared spaces intrusive. They stopped approaching, stopped filling roles that were criticized, and instead focused inward. Public spaces like gyms, coffee shops, and bookstores saw changes as men sought alternatives that allowed them to avoid conflict. Now, as times grow tougher, there's a noticeable plea for those same men to return, to re engage, to provide the support that was once taken for granted. But many men have found that life without those obligations is not only manageable, but preferable, filled with savings, personal growth, and tranquility. Let's expand on this global perspective because this isn't isolated to one culture or country, it's a pattern emerging worldwide. In places like South Korea, for example, there's been significant pushback against certain ideologies, leading to innovative responses from men. Policies were proposed to limit persistent pursuits, but men adapted by creating boundaries that protected themselves. In workplaces, when accusations of gatekeeping arose, men responded by openly prioritizing fairness in competition, no longer extending preferential treatment. Entertainment shifted too, with content becoming more neutral, stripping away elements that were deemed problematic, resulting in changes that affected viewership. The low birth rates in countries like South Korea, Japan, and China aren't primarily driven by women's choices alone, but by men's collective decision to step away from marriage and family formation in those systems. Online, this has manifested in the growth of male centered communities, the manosphere, where discussions range from finance to personal development, all tailored to men's experiences. Creators who once focused solely on investments or gaming now incorporate analyses of gender dynamics, applying logic, mathematics, and real world observations to understand behaviors. This network provides support, information, and camaraderie without the complications of mixed interactions. Meanwhile, technological advancements like AI are accelerating changes, offering alternatives in companionship, entertainment, and even adult content that reduce reliance on traditional interactions. Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. Men are building parallel systems, from crypto based economies to skill sharing networks where participation is selective and often excludes those seen as adversaries. Tradespeople, for instance, may charge premium rates for services to certain clients, reflecting a broader sentiment of no longer offering discounts or favors freely. Overseas travel has become popular for those seeking different cultural dynamics, where lower costs and different values allow for fulfilling lives far removed from Western pressures. Home gyms, private male only fitness groups, and minimalist lifestyles are on the rise as men invest in themselves rather than external validation. Industries that once thrived on mixed social activities are feeling the impact. Restaurants, particularly those reliant on dates, see reduced patronage since men are no longer funding outings at the same rate. Gym chains struggle as former male members build home setups or join exclusive groups. Nightlife venues fill with groups that don't generate the same revenue, as spending habits differ significantly without male participation. As AI disrupts job markets, men, often more adaptable and minimalist, pivot to new opportunities like trading or decentralized work, while those tied to consumer driven lifestyles face greater hurdles. This all stems from years of accumulated experiences where men faced criticism for natural behaviors, legal risks in interactions, and extraction of resources through various systems. Terms were coined to shame everyday actions, courts were used to transfer wealth, and social media amplified accusations. Paternity issues, manipulative dating practices, and information sharing groups that damaged reputations all contributed to a growing wariness. Men learned to trust patterns over promises, to value observable actions, and to choose peace over chaos. Today, many men report higher savings, better mental health, and a sense of luxury and simplicity. They protect themselves from reality's harshness, no longer extending that shield broadly. Women sharing their struggles online highlight the void left behind. No more funded dates, spontaneous support, or attention. The game, as many see it, was unbalanced, and now men have stepped off the board entirely. As we continue this exploration, think about how these choices ripple outward, creating new norms and economies. Men rediscovering hobbies, building brotherhoods, prepping for uncertainties, all while women grapple with debt and isolation. The push was relentless, and the response was withdrawal, permanent for many. Society's collapse in certain areas leaves men thriving in their chosen solitude, focused on self preservation. As we peel back the layers of this story, it becomes clear that what we're witnessing is not some sudden outburst, but the culmination of decades of consistent messaging that finally landed exactly where it was aimed. Men were told repeatedly that their natural instincts were wrong, that their efforts to connect were intrusive, that their very way of being in the world needed to be reformed or removed. Society amplified these voices through every channel available, from classrooms to courtrooms, from social media feeds to primetime television. Terms were created to pathologize ordinary male behavior. Spaces that were once neutral became battlegrounds where a simple glance could be interpreted as threat, and legal systems were leveraged in ways that made any deep involvement with a woman feel like stepping into a minefield. Men heard it all, processed it, and instead of continuing to fight a battle that seemed rigged from the start, they chose the path of least resistance, withdrawal, not out of defeat, but out of a profound realization that peace was possible on the other side of disengagement. Think about the sheer volume of signals men received over the years. Campaigns highlighted perceived injustices in everyday interactions. Movements demanded accountability that often felt one sided. And public shaming became a tool wielded with devastating efficiency. A man sitting comfortably on public transport could suddenly find himself accused of taking up too much space. A compliment offered in good faith could be twisted into something sinister. A pursuit of romance could be labeled persistent harassment if it didn't align with unspoken rules that changed by the day. Family courts became arenas where resources were redistributed with little regard for fairness. Paternity assumptions were weaponized, and reputations could be destroyed with a single post or allegation. Dating itself turned into a high stakes game where men were expected to invest heavily upfront with no guarantee of reciprocity or even basic respect. Groups formed online to share warnings about specific men, effectively blacklisting them from entire social circles without due process or chance to defend themselves. All of this created an environment where the risks of engagement far outweighed any potential rewards. And so men adapted. They internalized the core message. If their presence was the problem, then removing that presence would solve it. They stopped initiating conversations in public, ceased approaching women they found attractive, and gradually withdrew from shared social spaces altogether. Gyms that once buzzed with balanced energy shifted as men built private setups at home or joined exclusive networks that guaranteed no drama. Coffee shops and bookstores saw fewer lingering male patrons as many opted for quiet solitude or male only gatherings. The message had been clear: give space, respect boundaries, do not impose. And millions of men took it to its logical conclusion. They gave all the space in the world, not just a little, but complete disengagement from the dynamics that had become exhausting and dangerous. Now, as the consequences of this mass withdrawal unfold, we're seeing a fascinating reversal in narrative. Where once there were demands for men to back off, now there are pleas for them to return, to re engage, to resume the roles they were criticized for filling. Women who previously celebrated independence are sharing stories of financial struggle, of loneliness, of realizing just how much everyday life had been supported by male participation that went unnoticed until it was gone. Videos surface daily of women expressing frustration that men no longer approach, no longer offer to pay, no longer fill the roles of provider and protector that were once denounced as outdated and oppressive. The irony is thick because the very independence that was championed is now revealing its limitations in a world where economic pressures do not discriminate by gender. Men, meanwhile, are reporting something unprecedented: rising levels of personal satisfaction and financial security. Single men are saving more than ever before, even in tough economic climates, because their expenses have plummeted. Without the constant outflow of resources toward dating, entertaining, or supporting partners, money stays in their pockets and grows through investments and careful planning. Mental health improves dramatically when daily life is no longer filled with navigating minefields of potential accusations or emotional turbulence. Many describe a sense of luxury in their simplicity: high quality meals prepared at home, peaceful evenings without arguments, weekends dedicated to hobbies and self improvement rather than obligatory social commitments. The minimalist nature that comes naturally to most men flourishes in this environment where less truly becomes more. This shift extends far beyond personal relationships and into the very fabric of the economy. Industries that relied heavily on male spending patterns are beginning to feel the pinch in profound ways. Fine dining establishments that once thrived on couples' nights out, where men traditionally covered the bill, now struggle to fill tables. Upscale bars and clubs that depended on men purchasing drinks for groups find themselves with rooms full of patrons who expect others to pay. The ripple effects touch everything from entertainment venues to retail sectors that marketed heavily toward couple oriented experiences. Even the tax base feels the impact as men work smarter rather than harder, often reducing hours or shifting to independent contracting that minimizes their contributions to systems they no longer feel invested in supporting. Parallel economies are emerging at an accelerating pace, built by men for men, with strict boundaries that exclude those who contributed to the original exodus. Cryptocurrency networks, skill bartering communities, and preparation focused groups operate on principles of mutual benefit among trusted participants. Women attempting to access these networks often find themselves on the outside looking in, as trust has been eroded beyond repair for many. Service providers in traditional trades have begun adjusting their pricing structures, reflecting a new reality where favors and discounts are reserved for those within the circle of reciprocity. An electrician called to a single woman's home may, quote, double the rate he'd offer to another man, not out of malice, but out of a simple recognition that the old social contract of unspoken mutual support no longer exists. Technology is amplifying this transformation in ways that would have seemed like science fiction just a decade ago. Artificial intelligence is rapidly filling gaps that once required human interaction, from companionship through sophisticated chatbots to entertainment that rivals or surpasses traditional adult content. Platforms that women relied upon for supplemental income are seeing massive disruption as AI generated alternatives flood the market, offering consistency and customization without the complications of real human dynamics. Young men, in particular, are forming deep connections with these digital alternatives, finding in them the understanding and lack of judgment that became increasingly rare in real world interactions. Globally, the pattern repeats with local variations that all point to the same underlying truth. In Eastern countries facing severe demographic challenges, men have organized responses that systematically remove incentives for continuing old patterns. Entertainment industries have been sanitized of elements that were deemed problematic, resulting in content that no longer appeals to its core male audience, who have simply moved on to other options. Workplace dynamics have shifted towards strict meritocracy, eliminating the preferential treatment that once existed. The result is a society where traditional expectations around family formation have collapsed, not because women refused them, but because men collectively decided the costs were no longer worth bearing. Perhaps the most profound change is internal. The way men have rediscovered themselves after years of being told who they should be rather than accepting who they are. Many speak of a spiritual awakening, a reconnection with purpose that exists independent of external validation. Hobbies long neglected are revived. Physical fitness reaches new heights through dedicated private training. Financial literacy becomes second nature as resources are directed toward building lasting security. Brotherhoods form that provide the social connection once sought in romantic relationships, deep bonds based on shared experience and mutual respect rather than obligation or performance. Women, facing the full weight of independence without the previous safety nets, are discovering just how challenging self sufficiency can be in a system that was never truly designed for universal individualism. Debt accumulates as consumer habits persist without corresponding income growth. Social circles fracture under the pressure of competition for dwindling resources, revealing the fragility that was always present but masked by abundance. The strong, supportive networks that were celebrated in media often prove insufficient when real survival needs emerge. Blame circulates freely, directed at men who left, at other women who secured partners, at society itself for allowing this to happen. Yet men who have walked away report no desire to return to the previous arrangement. The peace they have found is too valuable, the lessons too hard won, the risks too clearly understood. They see the pleas for what they are, not genuine desire for partnership on equal terms, but desperation born of necessity. Pattern recognition has replaced hope. Observable reality has trumped promises of change. The men who were told to leave have built lives that no longer have space for the chaos they escaped, and they guard that space carefully. As artificial intelligence continues its march forward, eliminating jobs at an unprecedented rate, the divergence will only widen. Men, with their natural adaptability and lower baseline needs, pivot quickly to new opportunities in decentralized systems, creative pursuits, and self directed enterprises. Women, more often tied to traditional employment structures and higher consumption patterns, face greater disruption without the previous fallback options. The coming years will likely see an acceleration of these trends, with entire sectors reorienting around the new reality of male disengagement. In many ways, this is the story of a social contract that was unilaterally broken and then mourned when the consequences arrived. Men provided structure, protection, and resources for generations, often at great personal cost. When that provision was no longer appreciated or reciprocated, when it became something to be criticized and dismantled, men did what rational actors do. They redirected their efforts toward their own well being. The result is a society in transition, moving toward separate spheres where men thrive in their independence and women grapple with the full implications of the independence they demanded. The men are gone, not in physical distance, but in commitment and investment. They have built something new from the ground up, something that prioritizes their peace above all else. And as the old systems continue to strain, under the weight of their absence, one truth becomes increasingly clear. Some doors, once closed, remain closed permanently. The era of men walking away is not ending, it is just beginning. And the world we knew is changing in ways that no one can fully predict, but everyone will eventually feel. As this new reality settles in deeper, something even more powerful starts to reveal itself. And this is where the story gets truly fascinating for anyone paying close attention. The men who walked away aren't just sitting around feeling smug or bitter, they're actively building, quietly, methodically, and at scale. While the old world argues about who's to blame, these men are constructing entirely new systems that run parallel to the collapsing mainstream. Systems designed from the ground up to reward competence, loyalty among brothers, and long term survival rather than short term validation or endless consumption. Picture small private warehouses on the outskirts of cities turning into invitation only maker spaces where guys trade CNC machining time for welding skills, 3D printing expertise for electrical work, crypto mining rigs for homegrown food. No women allowed, not because of hatred, but because the entire point is to have a space with zero drama, zero accusations, zero risk of someone will record a private conversation and post it online with a twisted caption. These aren't fringe compounds. They're popping up in every major metro area and plenty of rural zones too. Membership is earned through vouching from two existing members and a proven track record of reliability. Once you're in, you have access to tools, knowledge, bulk purchasing power, and a network that will show up if your truck breaks down at 2 a.m. or if you need a crew to help you move into a new off grid property. At the same time, the overseas pipeline is widening every single month. Tens of thousands of Western men, many of them remote workers, pulling six figures from laptops, are quietly relocating to places like Medellin, Cebu, Bucharest, and Chiang Mai. They're not sex tourists living in hostels. They're buying or building houses, marrying local women who still value family and femininity, and creating lifestyles that would cost $5 million back home. A man making $120K USD a year in the Philippines lives like a multimillionaire. Full staff, beachfront property, private schools for the kids he's now happily having because the woman he married didn't spend 10 years telling him children are a burden or that his natural desire to lead is toxic. These aren't isolated stories anymore. Entire neighborhoods in certain cities are now majority expat men with local wives and mixed kids running around speaking perfect English and the local language. The women back west see the Instagram posts and the YouTube vlogs, and they lose their minds because they're watching in real time as the men they told to disappear go build the exact family life that was supposedly oppressive and patriarchal somewhere else with someone else. Back home, the economic fallout keeps accelerating. Commercial real estate in nightlife districts is getting crushed. Entire streets of bars and clubs that used to be packed on Friday nights are now half empty or fully shuttered because the men who used to spend $300, $500 a night buying rounds and bottles simply don't show up anymore. The women still go out, still get dressed up, still post the photos, but the drinks stay undrunk because nobody is buying them anymore. Bartenders and bottle service girls are quitting in waves, moving back in with parents or switching to day jobs because the money dried up overnight. High-end hair salons, nail salons, luxury cosmetic stores, all seeing 30-50% drops in revenue because the disposable income that used to flow through female hands, income that largely came from boyfriends and husbands, is now staying in male bank accounts and getting invested in Bitcoin, mining equipment, or land in Paraguay. Even the dating apps are starting to crack. Companies like Match Group have watched their stock get hammered as male usage continues to plummet. Men figured out the apps were designed to keep them swiping and paying for premium features while 80% of women focused on the top 10% of profiles. Once the majority of average men deleted the apps and never came back, the whole business model started to implode. Women are now flooding those same apps with increasingly desperate bios. Just want a good conversation, tired of games, looking for something real. But the men who used to provide that attention are gone. They're in private Discord servers trading options plays, or they're on the beach in Bali with a woman who cooks dinner and doesn't roll her eyes when he talks about his goals. And the women who still believe It's 2015, and that high value men are hiding in their DMs are about to get a very harsh wake up call when the next recession hits and the corporate layoffs target the exact middle management and HR roles that employ so many of them. The trad wife fantasy that blew up on social media over the last couple years, that wasn't coming from men demanding it. That was women realizing the game had changed and trying to rebrand themselves as fast as possible to become competitive again. But here's the brutal truth: most of them still won't say out loud. The men who are actually capable of providing that lifestyle have already left the country or locked themselves into private networks where those women will never be vetted in. The few who stayed behind and still have resources are now running background checks, requiring women to sign prenups thicker than phone books and dating with extreme caution because they've watched too many brothers get destroyed in family court. The window where a woman could expect total commitment with zero accountability has slammed shut, and the draft coming through that window is ice cold. And still, every single day, new content appears from women asking the same question in 100 different forms. Where did all the good men go? The answer is simple, and it's the same answer they themselves gave for 20 years. We went where we're wanted. We went where a man can be a man without apologizing every 5 minutes. We went where peace is the default setting, not the exception you have to fight for. Some of us went overseas. Some of us went inside our own heads and built lives so fulfilling that adding chaos would be insane. And some of us just went quiet and let the world figure out what life looks like when men stop carrying 80% of the load while being told we're the problem. The most telling part: almost none of us are angry anymore. That fire has been replaced with something far more dangerous to the old system: total indifference. We don't hate women. We don't wish harm on anyone. We simply don't care what happens in spaces we've already left. If the clubs close, cool. If the apps die, fine. If entire sectors of the economy that depended on male spending collapse, that's not our problem to fix. We fixed our own lives first. And we're not going backward to rescue a system that spent decades telling us we were disposable. So when you see another video of a woman crying on TikTok about how she's 35, makes 200K, looks like a model, and still can't find a decent man who'll commit, understand what you're really watching: the final stage of a social experiment that's been running since the 1970s, finally reaching its logical conclusion. The experiment asked, what happens if we tell an entire generation of men they're not needed, their instincts are toxic, and their contributions are optional? We now have the answer. And it's being written in real time by millions of men who took the message seriously and built something better without the people who delivered it. And that, more than anything else, is why this movement isn't slowing down. It's accelerating. Every month, another 1,000 guys delete the apps for good. Every month, another few hundred book one-way flights. Every month, another private gym, another crypto co-op, another Brotherhood lodge opens its doors to vetted members only. The old world can scream, cry, shame, beg, or legislate all wants, but the men have already walked through the exit and locked the door behind them. As we move deeper into this evolving landscape, one of the most striking developments is how the men walking away movement has begun to influence younger generations in ways that ensure its longevity. Boys coming of age today are growing up in a world where the examples set by older brothers, uncles, and online mentors are crystal clear. Peace and self reliance are achievable, and the traditional path of chasing relationships at all costs is optional, often detrimental. These young men are not being radicalized in the negative sense. They are being educated in reality earlier than any previous generation. They watch the mistakes of their fathers and older siblings. They see the divorce statistics, the family court horrors, the endless online content from women expressing contempt for average men, and they make rational decisions accordingly. Schools and universities, once seen as gateways to success, are increasingly viewed with skepticism by young men who recognize that massive student debt for degrees with diminishing returns is a trap. Instead, many are choosing accelerated paths, trade schools that lead directly to six-figure incomes in plumbing, electrical work, HVAC, or welding, coding boot camps that land remote tech jobs, or straight into entrepreneurship with dropshipping, content creation, or crypto trading. A 17-year-old today can learn high income skills from free YouTube tutorials, build a portfolio, and be earning more than most college graduates by age 21, all without ever setting foot on a campus filled with ideological pressures. The gender enrollment gap widens further each year, and administrators scramble to attract male students with scholarships and programs that often go unfilled because the value proposition simply isn't there anymore. Social media algorithms have played a massive role in this education process. Platforms push content based on engagement, and the raw, unfiltered truth about gender dynamics generates enormous engagement. Young men discover channels and creators who break down female behavior patterns, relationship risks, and financial pitfalls with logic, data, and real world examples. They learn about hypergamy not as a slur, but as an observable phenomenon backed by dating app statistics, showing that most women pursue a small percentage of men. They see the savings rate differences between single men and single women, the spending habits, the long term outcomes of marriage for men in Western countries. This isn't indoctrination, it's pattern recognition on a scale never before possible. And once a young man sees the patterns clearly, there's no unseeing them. He doesn't become bitter, he becomes strategic. Family structures are shifting in response as well. Older generations of men who went through difficult divorces or challenging relationships are now the cool uncles who teach their nephews practical life skills: how to budget ruthlessly, how to vet people carefully, how to build multiple income streams, how to stay physically strong and mentally sharp. These uncles aren't preaching celibacy or hatred, they're sharing hard won wisdom about protecting your peace and building a life that doesn't depend on any single person or institution. The message resonates deeply because it's delivered with love and lived experience, not abstract theory. Boys grow up seeing that the uncle who never settled down has a paid for house, multiple vehicles, travels the world, and seems genuinely happy, while the married family man next door is stressed, overweight, and arguing about money constantly. The fitness industry provides another clear window into this transformation. Commercial gym chains that once thrived on mixed memberships are continuing their decline as men build private facilities that prioritize results over social performance. Home gyms have become standard in many male households, and power racks, barbells, bumper plates, all purchased once and used for decades. Groups of friends chip in together for garage setups that rival professional facilities. Invite only warehouses with turf, sleds, strongman equipment, and recovery tools are multiplying rapidly. These spaces foster intense brotherhood. Spotters who push you to new personal records, training partners who hold you accountable, post workout conversations that go deep into life strategy and philosophy. Women who pushed for mixed gyms filled with rules about staring or approaching now find those same gyms emptying of the serious lifters who drove the energy and revenue. Nutrition and health optimization follow the same pattern. Men in these networks share knowledge about intermittent fasting, carnivore diets, cold exposure, sauna protocols, and hormone optimization. Blood work panels become routine, deficiencies are corrected quickly, and the results speak for themselves. Men in their 40s with testosterone levels higher than most 25-year-olds had a decade ago. Body fat in the single digits, energy levels through the roof. This isn't vanity, it's survival preparation for uncertain times ahead. A strong, healthy man with skills and resources is resilient in ways that no amount of money alone can provide. The creative output from this movement is exploding as well. Music, once dominated by themes of romantic pursuit and heartbreak, now features independent artists rapping and singing about self mastery, brotherhood, financial independence, and the beauty of solitude. Podcasts that started small have grown into media empires, discussing everything from ancient philosophy to modern investing through the lens of masculine development. Books self published on platforms like Amazon climb bestseller lists with titles about building wealth quietly, understanding female nature objectively, and creating a life of purpose without external validation. The content isn't angry anymore, it's calm, confident, and solution oriented. Women's responses to all this vary widely, but patterns are emerging. A growing number are attempting to adapt by adopting more traditional presentations, learning to cook elaborate meals, dressing more femininely, expressing interest in family and children earlier. Social media fills with content from women positioning themselves as trad wives or high value women who understand men's needs. Some are genuine in their shift, having recognized the unsustainable nature of previous cultural norms. Others appear to be performing a role in hopes of attracting the remaining high quality men who haven't fully disengaged. The challenge they face is credibility. After years of messaging that traditional roles were oppressive, sudden reversals are met with skepticism. Men who have built peaceful lives aren't eager to risk them on promises of change without substantial proof over time. Government responses are starting to appear as the demographic crisis deepens. Politicians in various countries float ideas for incentives to boost marriage and birth rates, tax breaks for married couples, payments for children, even suggestions of penalties for remaining single. These proposals consistently fail to gain traction among men who view them as attempts to lure them back into systems that already demonstrated their risks. The math simply doesn't work when divorce can strip a man of half his assets and access to his children on questionable grounds. Until legal reforms address family court biases, paternity fraud consequences, and default maternal custody assumptions, financial incentives alone won't move the needle significantly. International migration patterns continue to accelerate. Countries that maintain more traditional gender dynamics see influxes of skilled Western men bringing capital, expertise, and stable family formation. Local economies benefit from the construction, businesses, and taxes generated by these transplants. Young local women gain access to partners with resources and work ethic, while Western women lose access to the men who once formed their dating pool. This isn't a coordinated exodus, it's millions of individual decisions compounding into a massive demographic shift. Real estate in popular destinations like Portugal, Mexico, and various Southeast Asian countries sees strong demand from remote workers seeking lower costs and higher quality of life. The psychological freedom that comes with this lifestyle choice cannot be overstated. Men who once lived with constant background anxiety about saying the wrong thing, about financial extraction, about false accusations, now report levels of calm that feel almost foreign at first. Sleep improves dramatically without the stress of relationship drama. Decision making becomes clearer when not filtered through consideration of another person's emotional state. Time expands as obligations shrink. Weekends stretch luxuriously with no need to coordinate plans or manage conflicts. The mental bandwidth previously consumed by navigating mixed social environments becomes available for deep work, creative pursuits, and genuine rest. Spiritual exploration often follows. Many men find themselves drawn to ancient texts and practices, Stoicism, Zen Buddhism, Christian mysticism, indigenous wisdom traditions. The common thread is disciplines that teach mastery over one's own mind and emotions independent of external circumstances. Meditation, fasting, cold exposure, and physical challenges become regular practices, not for social media clout, but for internal transformation. The result is a generation of men with unusual levels of emotional resilience and clarity of purpose. Financial markets reflect these changes in subtle but significant ways. Investment patterns among single men skew heavily toward assets that preserve and grow wealth quietly. Real estate in stable jurisdictions, precious metals, Bitcoin, and other cryptocurrencies, dividend paying stocks in essential industries. Consumer debt levels among this demographic plummet as lifestyle inflation is rejected entirely. The average single man in his 30s today often has a higher net worth than his married counterpart despite similar income, simply because his resources aren't being directed toward maintaining a more expensive household or funding someone else's consumption. Community service and philanthropy take on new forms as well. Rather than traditional charity that often benefits mixed or female focused causes, many men direct their giving towards supporting other men, funding trade scholarships for young guys from broken homes, creating mentorship programs for boys without fathers, building facilities for veterans struggling with reintegration. These efforts stay under the radar, operating through private networks rather than public institutions that might redirect resources elsewhere. The dating market itself has fractured into distinct segments. At the top, a small percentage of exceptionally high value men still participate in traditional Western dating, often with extreme caution and legal protections. Below that, international dating and marriage dominate for men seeking family life. A growing number choose intentional, child free lives focused on personal development and brotherhood. Very few average men remain active in the domestic dating pool, creating the scarcity that drives so much of the current tension. As artificial intelligence continues to advance, new possibilities emerge for companionship and support that bypass traditional relationship risks entirely. Advanced chatbots and virtual companions provide conversation, emotional support, and even creative collaboration without the complications of human dynamics. While still early, the trajectory is clear. Technology will fill gaps that once required problematic interactions. Combined with improving sex robotics and virtual reality experiences, the need for real world romantic pursuit diminishes further for men who prioritize peace above all. The broader cultural conversation struggles to acknowledge the full scope of what's happening. Media narratives still frame male disengagement as a problem to be solved through shaming or incentives, rather than recognizing it as a rational response to decades of systemic issues. Until the underlying legal, social, and economic risks are addressed substantively, the trend will continue and likely accelerate. Men have demonstrated that they can build fulfilling lives without the previous social contract, and millions more make that discovery every year. The future that's emerging isn't dystopian. For many men, it's utopian in its simplicity and freedom. Communities of competent, peaceful, purposeful men creating value for themselves and each other, unburdened by obligations that no longer serve them. The old world may continue its struggles, but a new one is being built in parallel, brick by brick, brotherhood by brotherhood. As we look even further ahead into the late 2020s and early 2030s, the full implications of men walking away begin to crystallize into something that no one in the mainstream fully anticipated when this shift first started gaining momentum. What began as millions of individual choices for personal peace has now matured into a complete alternative society operating alongside the old one with its own economy, culture, values, and future trajectory. This isn't a fringe phenomenon anymore. It's a parallel civilization being built by men who refuse to continue participating in a system that extracted from them while offering diminishing returns and increasing risks. The men who walked away early are no longer just surviving, they're thriving in ways that make the old lifestyle look outdated and burdensome by comparison. And one of the most visible signs of this new reality is the explosion of private land ownership among men in rural and semi rural areas. Vast tracts of farmland, timberland, and mountain property that were once difficult to sell are now being snapped up by small groups of men forming limited liability companies or land trusts to purchase hundreds or thousands of acres collectively. These aren't survivalist compounds hidden behind razor wire. Many are beautifully developed properties with multiple homes, shared infrastructure like high speed internet, solar arrays, wells, and septic systems, plus extensive workshops and recreational facilities. A typical setup might include 5 to 15 men, each owning their own house and a proportional share of the common land, with agreements in place that maintain privacy while enabling cooperation on large projects. They raise cattle, grow orchards, hunt and fish on their own property, and run businesses remotely or through on site manufacturing. These communities are designed for long term sustainability and intergenerational wealth. Young men are brought in as apprentices or junior partners, learning skills from older members in exchange for labor and loyalty. Land is passed down or sold only to vetted individuals who share the same values of self reliance, brotherhood, and peace. Women are not banned out of hatred, but simply because the entire purpose of these spaces is to eliminate the drama, legal risks, and emotional turbulence that mixed environments often bring. Members report that the absence of relationship stress allows for unprecedented levels of productivity and creativity. Projects that would take years in the outside world get completed in months when a group of focused, skilled men work together without distractions. The economic power of these communities is growing exponentially. By pooling resources, they achieve economies of scale that individual families could never match. Bulk purchases of equipment, materials, and supplies drive costs down dramatically. Shared heavy machinery, tractors, excavators, sawmills means no one has to take on massive debt for tools they use only occasionally. Energy independence through solar, wind, and microhydro keeps monthly expenses near zero. Food security comes from on site gardens, livestock, and wild game. Many of these groups generate significant income through remote work, e commerce, or small scale manufacturing that ships products nationwide. The result is a level of financial freedom that most people in urban apartments can barely imagine. No rent, no utility bills, no commuting costs, and multiple income streams funding travel, investments, and further land development. Urban equivalents are emerging as well. In cities, men are forming tight knit housing cooperatives where they buy entire apartment buildings or blocks of townhouses and rent or sell units only to other vetted men. These become oases of calm in chaotic urban environments. No loud parties, no domestic disputes spilling into hallways, no false accusations from neighbors. Common areas include gyms, saunas, theaters, and workshops. Security is prioritized with systems that would make most gated communities jealous. The sense of safety and brotherhood allows residents to focus on building wealth and skills rather than constantly watching their backs. Young professionals live in these spaces while stacking capital, then transition to rural properties as their resources grow. The cultural output from these communities is starting to influence broader society in subtle but powerful ways. Music collectives produce albums that celebrate masculine virtues, strength, honor, competence, loyalty. Film groups create high quality short films and series distributed on independent platforms, telling stories of brotherhood and self mastery that resonate with millions who feel alienated by mainstream Hollywood. Literature flourishes as men write books about philosophy, history, strategy, and practical living that climb bestseller lists without traditional publishing support. Art takes on new forms. Blacksmithing, woodworking, stone carving, and metalwork produce pieces that blend ancient craftsmanship with modern design. These creations aren't just decorative, they're functional tools, furniture, and equipment used daily in the communities that made them. Education within these networks has evolved far beyond what public systems offer. Young men learn not just trades and academics, but life mastery, financial literacy, starting with understanding compound interest at age 10, physical training integrated into daily routines, critical thinking through Socratic discussion groups, and emotional resilience through structured challenges. History is taught honestly, without ideological filters, giving context to current events that most schools avoid. Philosophy from Marcus Aurelius to Nietzsche provides frameworks for living with purpose in difficult times. The result is young men entering adulthood with skills, savings, and wisdom that give them decades long advantages over their peers who followed traditional paths. Women's attempts to access these networks inevitably fail because the trust simply isn't there anymore. After years of experiencing or witnessing false accusations, financial extraction through family courts, and social media shaming campaigns, men have built systems that prioritize safety above inclusion. Women who express genuine interest in traditional roles find that the men capable of providing high quality versions of those lives have either relocated overseas or fortified their boundaries domestically. The few who do form relationships with remaining high value men do so under strict terms. Ironclad prenups, separate finances, and clear expectations established up front. The era of blind trust and unlimited commitment without reciprocity is over permanently. The demographic consequences are now impossible to ignore. Birth rates in Western countries continue their freefall as fewer men participate in family formation within those systems. The women who once declared they didn't need men are discovering that government programs cannot replace the economic and social functions men provided at scale. Social safety nets strain under the weight of supporting growing numbers of single mothers and aging single women without corresponding tax revenue from high earning men who minimize their taxable income through smart structuring. Politicians promise solutions but lack the political will to address root causes like family court reform or cultural shifts that drove men away in the first place. International dynamics add another layer of complexity. Countries that maintain traditional gender roles see their populations stabilize or grow as Western men import capital and skills while forming families with local women. These nations gain educated, resourceful citizens who contribute taxes, start businesses, and raise children socialized in stable two parent homes. Meanwhile, Western countries experience brain drain and capital flight as their most productive men vote with their feet. Real estate markets in popular destination countries boom, while similar properties in the West stagnate. Education systems in host countries improve as mixed children of Western fathers and local mothers excel academically. Technology continues to accelerate the divergence. Virtual reality environments create immersive social spaces where men gather from around the world without physical risks. Advanced AI companions provide conversation, emotional support, and even creative collaboration that rivals human interaction in many ways. Robotics advances make physical companionship options increasingly sophisticated. Combined with improving healthcare that extends male prime years well into what used to be old age, The need for traditional relationships diminishes further. Men who once might have settled out of loneliness or social pressure now have viable alternatives that come without downside risks. The psychological profile of men in this movement has shifted dramatically from the early days, where once there was pain, anger, and resentment from broken relationships and systemic betrayal. Now there is predominantly peace, purpose, and quiet confidence. Men report waking up each day eager to work on their projects, spend time with brothers, and improve themselves without the constant background stress of navigating mixed social environments. Depression and anxiety rates plummet as lifestyles align with natural male tendencies toward competence, autonomy, and meaningful work. Life expectancy increases as health optimization becomes cultural norm rather than exception. Financial markets continue to reflect these underlying shifts. Investment firms notice that single men in prime earning years allocate capital differently, heavy into hard assets like land and precious metals, significant positions in cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies, minimal exposure to consumer debt instruments. The companies that thrive are those providing tools for independence, solar panels, water filtration, home fitness equipment, trade tools, and remote work infrastructure. Consumer brands targeting female spending habits struggle as disposable income concentrates in male hands who spend conservatively. The old social contract lies in ruins, but something stronger has risen in its place. Men have proven that they can build complete, fulfilling lives without the previous obligations that were once considered mandatory. They have communities, purpose, wealth, health, and brotherhood that surpass what most married men achieve under the old system. The peace they sought has been found, and it is guarded carefully. Attempts to shame or coerce them back into previous roles fall flat against men who have experienced true freedom and have zero interest in returning to captivity. Young women coming of age now face a very different reality than their mothers did. The cultural messaging that told them they could have it all, career, independence, family on their timeline, collides with the observable fact that the men required for the family part have largely opted out. Education systems filled predominantly with women produce graduates who enter job markets already saturated with similar credentials. Competition for the remaining high value men who haven't disengaged becomes fierce, driving standards higher while options shrink. Many will adapt by seeking partnerships overseas or accepting terms they once rejected, while others double down on independence and discover its limitations firsthand. The men who walked away watched these developments not with glee, but with the quiet satisfaction of having made the right choice at the right time. Their communities grow stronger each year as new members join and existing ones deepen their roots. Knowledge is passed down, wealth compounds, skills multiply. They build not for recognition or revenge, but because creation is what men do when freed from extraction and drama. The world they have created stands as proof that peace was always possible. It simply required removing oneself from systems that made peace impossible. As we approach the midpoint of this transformation, one truth becomes undeniable. Men walking away wasn't a temporary reaction to difficult conditions. It was the beginning of a permanent realignment in how society functions when one half recognizes its power to opt out and does so en masse. The old world continues its trajectory, but a new one has been born, built by men for men, rooted in brotherhood and self reliance. And that new world is just getting started. As we reach the culmination of this extraordinary journey, standing here in what feels like the dawn of a new era, the full scope of men walking away reveals itself not as a protest or a phase, but as one of the most significant social reorganizations in modern history. What started with individual men choosing solitude over chaos, peace over obligation, and self preservation over extraction, has now blossomed into a complete self sustaining civilization built on principles that prioritize brotherhood, competence, resilience, and unapologetic masculinity. The men who listened when they were told they weren't needed, who took the repeated messages at face value and simply removed themselves from the equation, have not only survived, they have redefined what thriving truly means in a world that tried to break them. But look around at the landscape they've created. Vast networks of private land holdings stretch across continents, owned by men who pooled their resources and built environments where drama cannot enter because the gates are guarded by trust, earned over years, not assumed through ideology. These are places where a man wakes up to the sound of birds, brews his coffee without interruption, and spends his day working on projects that matter. Whether restoring a vintage engine, expanding a solar array, training in a private gym, or mentoring a younger brother who's just beginning his own journey. No arguments over money, no accusations hanging in the air, no walking on eggshells to avoid triggering an emotional storm. Just purpose, progress, and the deep satisfaction of building something lasting with men who share your values. The economic engine powering this new world is formidable and growing stronger every year. Trillions of dollars that once flowed into consumer spending, expensive dates, family obligations, and systems designed to extract from men now remain in male hands, compounding quietly through intelligent investments in land, technology, precious assets, and decentralized networks. Single men have become the wealthiest demographic in many Western countries, not because they all earn massive salaries, but because they live far below their means and direct every surplus dollar toward freedom. The minimalist lifestyle that comes naturally to most men, once mocked as immaturity or lack of ambition, has proven to be one of the greatest financial superpowers imaginable. A man with no dependence, no lifestyle inflation, and no emotional spending can amass generational wealth in a single decade. The brotherhoods that have formed are deeper and more reliable than most modern marriages ever were. Men who once felt isolated in a society that told them vulnerability was weakness have discovered that true strength lies in having brothers who will drop everything to help you move, fix your truck, or stand beside you in hard times. These aren't superficial friendships maintained through occasional texts or social media likes. These are bonds forged through shared labor, shared challenges, and shared victories. When a member of one of these communities faces a crisis, health issues, business setbacks, family emergencies, the network mobilizes with efficiency and generosity that government programs can only dream of matching. Resources flow freely among brothers because trust is absolute and reciprocity is the foundational principle. Creativity has exploded in ways no one predicted. Freed from the need to perform for validation or maintain appearances, men are producing art, music, literature, and innovation at levels that rival historical golden ages. Independent filmmakers create stories that resonate with millions of men who felt unseen by mainstream media. Musicians craft anthems of self mastery and brotherhood that dominate private playlists and independent charts. Writers produce works of philosophy and practical wisdom that guide entire generations without ever seeking approval from traditional gatekeepers. Craftsmen build furniture, knives, homes, and machines that blend ancient techniques with cutting edge design. The output isn't driven by fame or fortune, but by the pure joy of creation and the desire to leave something valuable for the brothers who come after. The health and vitality of these men stand as a stark contrast to the broader society. Optimized nutrition, rigorous training, recovery protocols, and the complete elimination of relationship stress have produced a generation of men who look, feel, and perform decades younger than their chronological age. Testosterone levels soar naturally through lifestyle alone. Body composition reaches elite athletic standards without obsessive tracking or disordered eating. Mental clarity sharpens as chronic stress evaporates. Sleep becomes deep and restorative without chemical assistance. Life expectancy projections for this demographic are rewriting actuarial tables as men who maintain these habits into their 50s and 60s show biological markers more typical of men 20 years younger. Women who once declared independence as the ultimate goal now face the full weight of that reality without the previous male infrastructure that made it feasible. The consumer economy that depended on female spending, much of it subsidized by male partners, continues its slow collapse. Retail districts that once buzzed with activity now feature rows of empty storefronts and going out of business signs. Beauty industries shrink as disposable income dries up. Entertainment venues that relied on couples' nights out operate at fractions of previous capacity. The tax base erodes as men structure their lives to minimize contributions to systems they no longer benefit from. Government programs strain under growing demands while revenue sources contract. The promises of state provision that replaced traditional family structures prove hollow when the productive class opts out en masse. The demographic winter that experts warned about has arrived, not because women refuse marriage and children, but because men collectively decided the risks and costs were unacceptable. Birth rates plummet to levels that threaten long term economic stability. Schools consolidate and close as student populations shrink. Pension systems teeter on the brink as fewer workers support growing numbers of retirees. Immigration policies become desperate attempts to import replacement populations, but cultural integration challenges mount. Meanwhile, countries that maintained traditional dynamics thrive with stable or growing populations, bolstered by Western men who brought capital, skills, and family oriented values. The men who walked away feel no guilt for these outcomes. They offered partnership, provision, and protection for generations, often at great personal cost. When those offers were met with contempt, criticism, and systemic extraction, they withdrew them, not out of spite, but out of rational self respect. The peace they found on the other side proved too valuable to sacrifice for pleas born of desperation rather than genuine appreciation. Pattern recognition replaced hope. Observable reality trumped promises of change. The door that closed behind them did not reopen because the life they built beyond it surpassed anything available in the previous arrangement. Young men coming of age today inherit a roadmap that their fathers never had. They grow up watching uncles and mentors live lives of abundance, purpose, and tranquility. They learn early that peace is not something you negotiate for, it's something you protect through boundaries and wise choices. They understand that true wealth is measured in freedom, not possessions. They know that brotherhood provides the social connection humans need without the complications that mixed environments often bring. They enter adulthood with skills, savings, networks, and wisdom that give them advantages previous generations spent decades acquiring, if they acquired them at all. The old world continues its trajectory, struggling under the weight of its own contradictions. The new world, built by men who walked away, grows stronger, quieter, and more resilient with each passing year. It operates on principles that cannot be legislated away or shamed into submission. Competence over credentials, loyalty over ideology, results over intentions, peace over drama. It welcomes those who prove themselves worthy through actions, not words. It expands organically as more men discover the path and choose to follow it. This is not the end of society as some feared. It is the birth of something better for those who built it. A society where men are free to be fully themselves, where brotherhood replaces bureaucracy, where creation flows from purpose rather than performance. The men who were told to go away did exactly that. They went away and built paradise on their own terms. And in doing so, they proved that paradise was always possible. It simply required removing the obstacles that made it impossible before. The story of men walking away is not one of loss or destruction. It is one of liberation, creation, and triumph. The men are not coming back. They never really left. They simply moved forward into lives that honor their nature, their efforts, and their right to peace. And in that forward movement, they have shown the world what becomes possible when men stop carrying loads they were never obligated to bear and start building the future they always deserved. All roads led here. All roads still lead forward. What did you think about this entire journey we just went through together? Did any part of it resonate deeply, challenge your views, or confirm something you've been observing in your own life? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and I genuinely want to hear your perspective. Like the video if you liked it. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you really liked it, go ahead and share it with someone who needs to see this today. And as always, just remember that all roads lead to MWA, men walking away, and cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.